What's up, fam? You're listening to the Story Hacker podcast, soon to be the Story Better podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick, and today we are talking about all things internal narrative.
You're listening to the Story Hacker podcast. We believe a better internal narrative will change your world. Here's your host.
Yo, what is good? I'm your host. My name is Nick. This is the Story Hacker podcast. We've been the Story Hacker podcast since 2016, and this year, 2024, we will be moving to the name Story Better. Why? Because better stories lead to brighter futures, and hacking, it only lasts for so long. What I've really realized from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is that it's these tiny little systematic changes that we make to our behaviors that's going to get us to the end result that is a better story, that is a brighter future. A lot of things that we take a look at script writing, we take a look at psychology, and we take a look at marketing because those are in the cultural zeitgeist, and those are what really form our identity, our internal narrative. And so I want to talk to you today about this big idea of why internal narrative. Why is this so important to me? And why should you give internal narrative a second glance? And so I'll ask you this question. If you could guarantee success in any endeavor, any domain, any project, whatever it is you do, would you do it? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. Guaranteed success means, of course, I'm going to do it. But would you still go after the same goal if you only accomplished 95%? Maybe. What about 75%? What about 45%? This mindset is grading your outcome before it's even happening, meaning the mindset of goals being binary. It's either on or it's off. It's either I hit the goal or I don't hit the goal. As I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, I love the 5 points that he gives at the first chapter of how goals can sometimes actually sabotage you. When you meet your goal, you stop performing the performance thing that you need to be at your top performance. And so what is happening is goals can sometimes create a psychological bias, and you can just, let go of all the work that you've been doing towards a marathon as soon as you cross the finish line. Finish lines can actually be a failure in some instances. So being afraid to fail is a byproduct of this industrial revolution education mindset. You see, like, school teachers have to teach compliance and accuracy and for efficiency. In order for you to accomplish your goals, you're going to need a couple of things: autonomy, mastery, purpose, creativity, and experimentation to solidify the knowledge to turn to skills. And then the fastest way to do that is through action and not necessarily learning. It's like learning while doing. So you can have this head knowledge in the world, but it's the practice of your knowledge as a skill set that's going to move you. It's going to move the needle in your life. And so knowledge plus practice is actually a skill. And so why do I tell you this? Because I learned this in writing a book. In 2016, I wrote a book, and there was two main premises of this book. One was what matters most, and the second is what am I willing to accomplish today? And when it comes to internal narrative, some of these are two driving forces, at least for me, when it comes to the story that I was telling myself about myself and the world around me. These are two primal questions that get to the core of the internal narrative, your self-story. And if you want to get clarity and confidence to build stronger habits that impact your work, your relationships, the self-story is something that I really think you should invest in. And so there is a link you can go to, storybetter.co. It's something called Story Mode 90, and it allows you for the next 90 days to really focus on your internal narrative. And the way that you do that is through daily exercise, moving your body. It's through reading nonfiction books, and it's also through a checklist of accomplishing your goals. What do you want to do? And so that's there for you at storybetter.co. And so words are how we communicate. And it's so important that we don't wait another year to change our vocabulary, to change our words. And so when you think about what your feelings are expressed through words. And the word world is made up of words. And can you imagine going a whole day without reading, without speaking, or even thinking about words? And the truth is, our reality is shaped by words. And the words in our mind constantly bring an encounter of the feelings. And if those feelings are colored by danger, distraction, shamefulness, undeserving, unfit, if that's what you're thinking about yourself or about your environment, it's going to come out in the way that you behave, and that's your story. And the way that your brain shapes your central nervous system is based upon information you feed it. The information gets processed into feelings, and over time, those feelings can turn into something like a defense mode. That every time that you see an older gray-haired gentleman, it might send a trigger or something down your body because you don't trust older white males, whether that's doctors, lawyers. Positions of power make you feel that you have a pit in your stomach. And this is really interesting because there was a study done, and the study is actually called Psychological Problems in Children of War Veterans with Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it's a cross-sectional study from August of 2008. And it cites this is huge. In comparison with veterans without PTSD, veterans with PTSD reported significantly more developmental and behavioral and emotional problems in their children. Not only themselves, their children. It is our environment, it is genetics, it's the relational influences that shape our temperament, our belief systems, and ultimately our self-story. And so you actually are inheriting genes that if your parent has PTSD, if your parent has something with the central nervous system, like ADD, alcoholism. That's one of the key traits of my story is my great-grandfather. Actually, I take that back. Sorry. My grandfather was an alcoholic, died at an early age. I believe he was like 37 or 42, somewhere, early in life. In his midlife, he passed away, and it was because of alcoholism, just completely destroyed his body. And while my father was not an alcoholic and, touched alcohol occasionally or at social events, I didn't touch alcohol until I was in my 30s. And what I started to realize was I didn't like it necessarily. It just felt like it slowed me down, and it felt like I was just not firing on all cylinders. Come to understand that this whole idea of genetics, that the brain of somebody who has alcoholism, that will be passed down to their children. I have ADD. I have type 2 inattentive ADD because of a choice that somebody made decades ago, not even thinking about me. And this is true to you to some extent. You are the product of your environment, genetics, and relational influences that have shaped your temperament, your belief system, and ultimately your story. I had to say that again because it's so true. While we can't go back in time and fix these things, while there's no time machine and a Doc Brown or a Morty with his universal travel machine or whatever he has, we can't correct those things. We can't correct our upbringing or our genetics or the friends that we chose when we were 15 or 16 years old. And so I don't think blaming other people is the way to go. I think it to some extent negates our own responsibility. I think we should acknowledge it. Yeah, thanks, Grandpa, for what you did to my brain. He didn't think he was doing it. He's probably trying to cope the best that he can. Does it suck that I have ADD? Yes. Does it suck that my children probably have ADD? Absolutely. But playing the victim is a mentality where you give up the autonomy, the internal focus and control to make ourselves feel better about our self-story. Like if we have a poor self-story and it's just blaming other people, that doesn't give you the autonomy that you need to make changes. While I would never suggest embracing the victim mentality, it's a default mode for so many people. And please hear me. If you've been a victim of abuse or neglect, or you're neurodivergent, you're suffering from a health-related issue, or you feel sad and lonely to the point of acting on it, I'm asking you, finding a way forward is going to be tough, and progress will probably look like micro progresses on some day. So it's so important that you're kind to yourself, you're kind to your story, and that you give yourself some space to heal. You'll have good days, you'll have bad days, but relegating your story to someone else or something in the past, something that you're not willing to participate in, will not move you forward to where you want to be. In philosophy, the existentialists have this term, it's called bad faith. And bad faith is when you believe and act on something that you don't align with. Being authentic is the key to your story, and it's key in many philosophies as well. The self-story is boiled down to the words you believe about yourself and how your central nervous system responds to that belief. One of my favorite books by far for the past couple of years has been this book by Edwin Friedman, and is called The Failure of Nerve. And while it seems on the outset to be a book about leadership, it is really a book about your own central nervous system. And what Edwin Friedman found is the people who have the most out of control nervous systems actually have the most control, or try to exercise the most control, in organizations, in families, and in life. And the reason that I tell you this is because you might see somebody who seemingly has it all together. But if the central nervous system is firing in such a way that is overloading them with cortisol, it is overloading them, making them wake up at 3 a.m. every morning because they are so ingrained in a central nervous system that is based upon fear, that is based upon them not being good enough, shame, and trying to prove through their actions, that central nervous system is never going to allow them to operate at their optimal space. And so the way that you do this is through differentiation. And I love what Friedman says about differentiation. Differentiation is the ability to look at somebody and say, I don't agree with you on that, but I'm also not going to separate from you based upon this. I believe this is going to heal the relational fabric of our stories, of our society, and really the internal narrative at large. Your internal narrative is predicated on, one, your ability for your central nervous system to find calm. Two, for you to be able to differentiate from the people around you in opinion and in mindset, because that's just going to lead to better outcomes, but at the same time, still staying connected. This is a very, very difficult concept because it is a paradox. And one thing we love about paradox in this podcast is both things can be true at the same time. And so while we are talking about internal narrative, while we are talking about a calm central nervous system, this idea of bad faith is just placing your faith in something that is not going to give you the ROI on what you want to see. A lot of times that bad faith can be in a religious system. It can be in a political system. It can be in a system that no longer serves you. So while it's so important that you calm your central nervous system, that you stay differentiated and don't connect, the third and final thing that I will tell you about your self-story is that you have to have, and this is so, so key. I cannot stress this enough. This is one of those things that if you were to implement in your life today, it would just change things. It is the ability for you to have these micro moments of self-care throughout your day that lead you to an ultimate goal. In 2022, Jonah Hill created a documentary on Netflix called Stutz. It's because of his therapist, Phil Stutz. And one of the things that brought a lot of clarity when it came to self-care and, story better and all of those things was these things. I don't know what he called them in the film, but I think like story cards is what I've been mentioning them. But like you have these lines and these circles, and it's just what you need to do in order for you to feel better that day. And a couple of things that I have for mine are move, meditate, fuel, create, connect, play, journal, fun, which is probably different from play in some aspects, hydrate, and read. These are the 10 things that I will put on my card. That is going to ensure that I'm creating a habit of self-care. So yeah, the documentary Stutz is where I got this from, but I continue to use it daily. And I also give myself a score out of 100. And so I'm landing in the 60s. So anything above 50 is great. 70s are wonderful. 85 is just phenomenal. 100 is like just the unbelievable day, the perfect day. And so all that to say, these cards definitely help when it comes to this big idea of self-care, your internal narrative, and how these small little changes can make a big impact on your story. Where would I land if I have these moments of self-care? What this is going to do is, one, it's going to calm my central nervous system. Two, it's going to get me to those microatomic habits that I'm going to find that when I don't have them in my life, I'm going to crave them. So I'm going to start to create a habit around these things. And so it's so important to find ways to gamify, to find ways to put things in front of you that you can see. And so that is something that I do quite often. And I'll give you the things that really help move my day forward. And then finally, one of those things along the play is actually this podcast. I'm not getting paid to do this podcast. I don't have a degree in any of this subject matter. I'm just super hyper focused on being able to take what psychologists and the professionals, the medical professionals, their neuroscientists are saying, translate it in a way that's fun, in a way that is actionable, and that you as a listener can go ahead and take it and do something with it. Because a lot of these times, whenever I look at the metrics of like a confidence interval of a CI, to 1.51 to 3.53, those types of things, those confidence intervals, they don't mean anything to you. Like that means nothing to you when we talk about odds ratio. And so that type of thing, non-actionable. what I love is taking the psychology, taking the neuroscience, and making it actionable for you. If you found any part of this podcast helpful, you can always go to storybetter.co and you can download the Story Mode 90. It's 90 days to a better internal narrative. You can check that out. If you want more of this type of stuff and you don't want to wait for the next podcast, you can always go to Amazon and check out the Storytelling Heart by Nick Ovaya. That is me. Storytelling Heart by Nick Ovaya. You can go pick that up on Amazon as an audiobook. Sorry, not an audiobook, is just a regular book. And I do believe that there is a ebook floating around there somewhere. It might be on Gumroad. You can go to nickovaya.com and just click on the book link to find all the ways that you could get that book. There's a free version out there as well somewhere. Don't know where that is, but I'm positive that it's on a pay what you want site. I think it is Gumroad. So yeah, go check those things out. I appreciate you listening to this podcast. Any of it resonated with you, give me a follow on any of the social media at Nick_Ovaya. And until we chat again, I hope you tell the world a great story. Peace.